We had a little fun last week talking about, some of the highlights and the best moments of WCW Nitro history, or at least your favorite moments. So we thought this week we would ask Eric, what were your favorite WCW matches on Nitro? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do a top 5 for Eric Bischoff's favorite WCW Nitro matches.
Here we go.
Number 5.
Coming in at number 5 is certainly one of the most famous matches in Nitro history. We're talking about Bill Goldberg and Hollywood Hogan live on TNT on Monday night, July 6th, I believe, 1996. Perhaps it's July 7th, but no, wait, that's not right. It's 1998. That's right. Yep. This is the Nitro from 1998. Man, where does the time go? This is obviously the largest crowd in the history of WCW Nitro. July 6, 1998. You see there as the show is going off the air, Goldberg is posing with the big gold belt in the right hand and the U.S. title on the left hand. And this was in the backyard of the home of WCW Nitro. So it does feel like this is a shoe-in to be on your favorites list. Were you strutting like a peacock that day? All those Turner executives there, and here's this huge crowd, and they're just pandemonium for Goldberg at that moment. That had to feel like a high watermark of just personal achievement almost for you, right, Eric?
I mean, it was, there was, I don't remember what the crowd number was. I think it was around 40, 45,000, whatever it was. But it was a sellout. And back then, that was a pretty big deal in Atlanta. And I was excited about that. The way the whole thing came together was almost spontaneous. I've told the story before. I won't bore people with it again, but I'm in California on business, driving down. I was in Marina Del Rey and looking for an exit. I get a phone call from Hulk, and he said, "Hey, I got an idea. I want to run it by you." I pulled over to the side of the road, and he said, I want Bill to beat me in Atlanta. I said, "What?" Usually, those kinds of conversations would take place over the course of weeks of convincing and what ifs and where do we go from here. So for Hulk to call me spontaneously and throw that out there was very memorable. I was excited about it. And I knew it would be good. I knew it would be well received. But I think the reason it's one of my favorites is because for the very first time, Turner executives, those people who for years were trying to convince Ted to pull the plug on WCW, were all of a sudden first in line trying to get tickets for their friends and family. And that was more of an achievement to me from a corporate perspective than almost selling the building out, because that was a constant battle for WCW. It was a constant morale battle. You've got 60 or 80 full-time employees working for you, and they show up at work every day knowing that the executive committee at Turner Broadcasting would prefer that they don't show up to the building. In fact, they actually did move us out of the CNN Center. But you just felt like that unwanted guest at a party. And then to have it turn around in such a relatively short period of time. And now I'm getting calls from members of the executive committee who want to bring their kids and their kids' friends to a Nitro. That was a major accomplishment internally. And I think that's one of the reasons it's one of my favorite matches.
If you're curious, 41,412 fans in the building that night for a Monday night TV show that they could have sat at home and farted in their own couch and watched for free. But instead, they got in their car on a school night. I guess it's not technically a school night, but a work night, a weekday, and drove down and paid for parking and bought a ticket. Nobody wanted to miss such a monumental moment. People are still talking about it. I mean, no disrespect to Bill Goldberg. We've celebrated the legend. He recently had his last WWE match. But without him beating Hulk Hogan, his career doesn't look the same, right? Don't you agree? I mean, this is the biggest moment in his career for sure.
It absolutely was. I think look, Bill had a lot of steam behind him. He was really coming on strong, very, very successful, obviously. But beating Hogan on Monday Nitro, I think that just put the well-deserved crown on Bill Goldberg's head. That was the moment that where he was officially a bona fide superstar.
I mean, not to beat a dead horse here, but I'm just saying in an alternate universe, if you guys had decided to not pull the trigger and not take the belt off of Hulk, and Goldberg was unsuccessful in his attempt, I mean, some of the mystique, it's off. It changes forever. Like, I think it changes the course of his career and maybe WCW. If Hogan just beats him, I don't know if it's the same. Like, I'm glad that you guys had that vote of confidence in a new guy, a young guy, respectfully, a green guy. And you put it on him, and man, he got to take the ride. I think it's such an interesting thing to think. What if the booking was a little different? I think it all shakes out a lot differently in hindsight.
100%. In fact, I had a phone conversation with Bill yesterday. We talked about this match actually, and in Bill's words, this was the match that put him on the map.
It's easy to see why that was number 5, but we're not done. We got a few more.
Number 4.
This is a surprising pick. I guess it shouldn't be, because we know how much you love and appreciated and respected and certainly highlighted the cruiserweight division. Coming in at number 4 is Rey Mysterio and Dean Malenko from July of 1996. This is from Universal Studios, and Malenko is going to be defending his cruiserweight title against a familiar foe. Again, Malenko is well established here in this division, or at least more established, but the new bright shiny object in WCW in a big way is Rey Mysterio. And this is like a coming out party, if you will. But what a performance, and what an amazing moment when Rey is able to reverse a tilt-a-whirl backbreaker into a Hurricane Rana, grab the legs, and pin Malenko. And this is really the first great cruiserweight division match in the history of Nitro. We would see these continue through 96 and 97 and 98 and on and on. But I think we had seen some cruiserweight stuff before on Nitro. I think most people would point to this one and say, hey, that's it right there.
For me, Conrad, and to this day, whenever I have an opportunity to go back and watch, look, Rey Mysterio is in a universe all of his own. We all know that. He's an amazing performer that broke so much ground, and so many of the athletes, the wrestlers that you see today that are not 250 pounds.
Right.
Which is a lot of them now, right? Both in WWE and AEW and in TNA. They owe a debt of gratitude to Rey Mysterio, because he proved to the world that you don't have to be a larger-than-life character to be a great performer. That being said, Dean Malenko was my favorite. Now, that's a personal thing, right? It's subjective. Not comparing him to Eddie Guerrero or Ray or anything. I'm not talking about his in-ring technical expertise compared to those individuals.
Right.
But Dean made me believe.
Yeah, he did.
In a way that very few other performers did. The minute Dean came through the curtain, he had this cold, deliberate, just this aura that he brought to the ring with him long before he stepped foot on the mat. And it was his believability and the way he carried that character. Obviously, his performance in the ring was outstanding. I actually preferred Dean Malenko's style a little bit more than I preferred Rey Mysterio's style, because to me, Dean was more believable. It's subjective. It's just based on what I like, right? I'm not trying to compare them really, but their styles were different. And Dean was so believable in everything he did. To this day, he's one of my favorite performers. I think everybody acknowledges how great of a wrestler Dean Malenko is, but I think he's still underrated, underappreciated. He was magic. He was flawless. I dare anybody to go back and watch a Dean Malenko match and look for a botch. Look for anything that looks like it could have been a botch. You're going to be up all night looking for that shit. He was so good at what he did and so good at making me believe what he was doing.
Perhaps not the best analogy, but I know exactly what you mean. I know his gimmick name or his nickname was the Iceman, but there was this quiet, deliberate confidence that on some level almost makes me think of the Michael Douglas character in Falling Down, where you see
Yeah.
this guy who's sort of unassuming. He's got a short sleeve button up, a briefcase, a tie, and kind of some nerdy glasses, and you just don't expect much. But there's something about the look in his face and his expression where you're like, oh, that guy's not here to mess around. We need to get out of his way. That's kind of the way I felt about Dean Malenko and his approach to the ring and just adjusting his wrist tape. It was so matter of fact, Eric. Am I off base there?
No, I think it's exactly what I mean. It's a perfect example of what I was talking about. There was just something about him. You know, he used to come, he'd walk down the ramp and he'd be doing this.
Yeah.
You know, he wasn't posturing to the crowd. He wasn't pimping. He wasn't peacocking. He was just getting ready to fight for his life. That's the way I felt when he walked through that curtain. And I felt that way all the way up until the bell rang and ended the match. That this was a guy who was coming to the ring to fight for his life. And it's impossible for me not to become really engaged whenever I see that kind of a presentation, particularly because it was so different than everybody else's. You know, he didn't need the gimmicks. He didn't need all the pyro. He didn't need dancing girls. You know, he didn't need to bring a tiger to the ring. He just came out there ready to rip his opponent's head off.
Let's pick it back up where we were. I think it's time for another match from Nitro way back when.
Number 3.
No surprise here. We're going back to what started it all. The very first match on the very first Nitro, Brian Pillman and Jushin Thunder Liger on the debut Nitro. It was Labor Day, 1995, September 4th. And of course, this is a famous rematch. I think we all remember their Super Brawl match from a few years prior to this. Maybe that was back in 92, but it was like the gold standard for what WCW was doing different than the WWF in 1992. So what better way to stand out than, hey, let's run it back. And you played a few of the hits on that show. You had Sting and Ric Flair on that show, but you also had Pillman and Liger. Now we know with the star power of Sting and Flair, and it's a proven draw on Turner. Hey, we need to pop a rating at the Clash. Get Sting and Flair back over here. But this is different.
Yeah.
This is Eric making a statement, I feel like. Why was this the first Nitro match?
Oh, so many reasons. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that by this point in time, I was spending a lot of time in Japan, became much more familiar with Jushin Liger, probably learned to appreciate his style and his presentation much more than I had previously. He was always a huge fan of Brian Pillman. I knew that Brian and Liger could have a phenomenal match. But it also had a lot to do with building the brand. And as you pointed out, being different than my competition and doing something that made people recognize the difference between the format that I created for Nitro and the format that had been created for just about every wrestling show up until Nitro came along. It just fit. It gave us a more international feel, which was important to me. But I also just knew the match was going to be outstanding. I think Liger, he might not have been at the peak of his career at that point in time, but he was so freaking fun to watch. And so was Brian Pillman. I just knew it'd be a great match.
It was a great match, and we want to hear from you guys. What were your top 5 Nitro matches? Let us know in the comment below, and we'll cover those next week. Another special one that I know a lot of our fans and listeners remember so fondly comes in next. I can't wait for this one.
Number 2.
I think we all remember what happened in May of 99. Tragically, Owen Hart lost his life at Over the Edge, and you guys allowed Bret Hart an opportunity to pay tribute to Owen. And technically this happens when you're not with the company. You left several weeks prior to this and went fishing. But Bret Hart and Chris Benoit had a really special match on Nitro. a match that I still hear fans talk about today. They went 32 minutes, which makes it one of, if not the longest Nitro match in history. But it really was an ultimate sort of back and forth. I know we all think of Chris Benoit as a main event guy now, but that wasn't necessarily the case by 99. He not yet won the world title and not main evented any pay-per-views. Certainly within the business, if you were a hotline listener or a newsletter reader, you knew he was one of the best in the world. But that day, they brought out all the stops. 2 Canadians paying tribute to Owen Hart, Bret Hart, and Chris Benoit. And what sticks out to me about this one, Eric, is you're technically not even there. But the respect you had to have for both guys and the meaning behind the match, that comes in at number 2 for you, right?
Yeah, I'm a little bit sketchy on this one. What was the date on it again?
It's October 4th, 1999. They're at the Kemper Arena in Kansas City. As a reminder, that's the very building where Owen's accident happened. So this would have been Bret's first time being back in the building since his brother passed just 5 months prior, less than 5 months prior. And I think it's really classy that WCW and the Turner organization allowed him the opportunity to go out there and honor his brother in the best way he knew how, have a kick-ass wrestling match with Chris Benoit.
Well, you talk about 2 complementary performers, athletes, amazing psychology, impeccable technical work in the ring, the emotion of the moment because of everything that happened, as you pointed out, with Owen and Bret wrestling in that same building. I just think whosever idea it was, I'm not sure if it was Bret's or Russo's or whosever idea it was a phenomenal idea. And I just think the match brought so much emotion, but yet was such an amazing presentation because of the skill of both Bret and Chris. Absolutely one of my favorite matches.
It's a phenomenal match. I encourage everyone, if you've never seen it, because I realize, by late 99, respectfully, WCW wasn't as fun. Eric would agree with that too. But go watch this very special match. Bret Hart, Chris Benoit, October 4th, 1999, a tribute to Owen, 32 minutes. It was a kick-ass match. And there's one more that makes your list, Eric, and I can't wait to see what people think of this one.
Number 1.
We all know that you in real life have always been tight with Diamond Dallas Page. But DDP and Sting tore it down April 26, 1999, and it's for the world title. This is the era where DDP is going to become the man and become the world champion. And there's a red hot crowd here on hand at the Fargo Dome in Fargo, North Dakota. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about that. Why do you think the Fargo Dome did so well with Nitro? And I don't remember there being a lot of great WWE moments, but it feels like WCW, you guys had like a stronghold there.
Yeah, we did. It's hard to explain. I guess probably a lot had to do with the fact that Fargo is, from a routing perspective, like if your job is to book buildings, but do them in an efficient way so that you're not going from one end of the country to the other end of the country. Fargo often gets overlooked, or did at that time. Fargo often got overlooked for major television shows, major events, probably even big concerts. Like, I don't think the Rolling Stones ever would have played Fargo. Maybe, because they were in Minneapolis. But for the most part, a market like Fargo, because it's in the middle of the country, the northern part of the country, it's hard to get to. There's nothing remotely close to it as far as a major market. So if your job is to efficiently route your tour in major markets where you can sell out a show, but yet it's efficient from a travel perspective, Fargo's not going to be high on your list of things to do. When we brought a big event to Fargo, it was like the biggest deal that had happened there in a long time. So I think that had a lot to do with it. I like to think the fact that, there was a lot of Minnesota in WCW at that time. And that may have had a little bit to do with it too, but I think primarily it was because we were just a big damn deal, and Fargo didn't get a lot of big damn deals back in the day.
Just to add some context to what made this match so special, and it does bring up a point you and I have never really talked about. It's that DDP had just won the title 15 days prior at Spring Stampede, and it was a 4 corners match with a celebrity guest referee. It was literally a who's who. It was its own wrestling Hall of Fame, even in 99. And then there was DDP, who I'll admit felt like, which one of these is not like the other? I mean, you've got Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Sting, Ric Flair, and respectfully, DDP. He was the new kid on the block. And I think that's why it worked so well. He was the people's champ. He was the ultimate underdog. And that character wanted you to count him out, and he wanted to prove you wrong. And 15 days later, I guess Sting takes exception to how Dallas won the match, and he challenges him. And they worked their ass off in this. I mean, I even read a review that said this fantastic match was an indicator of Page's desire to produce his champion and a reminder that Sting could still go, and he was not bogged down by aging legends, uninterested in delivering the best in-ring content possible. And that crowd, without him, who knows if this match would have been as extraordinary as it proved to be. But what's interesting about this, the reason I bring it up, is this is the end of DDP's longest title run. Now, technically, he won the title 3 times, but between all 3 reigns, Eric, it's 17 days. I mean, he won it again for 2 days and in less than 1 day. He lost it on the same day in WCW in 2000. So it's weird to think, hey, he was the world champ 3 times, but for a total of 17 days. Now, I know nobody really keeps up with that stuff, and it doesn't really matter in the scheme of things. But with the benefit of hindsight, do you think that should read like, hey, Dallas didn't need the belt? Because we hear that a lot. Like, hey, The Undertaker didn't need to be champ. Hey, Jake the Snake didn't need to be champ. He was an attraction on his own. Did it work against the underdog character, the ultimate underdog character that DDP was, if he was the champion, or was it something else?
No, it wasn't, because it was for no other reason than Page, in my opinion, fell into the category where he didn't need the belt, but boy, the belt sure helped him, because he was the underdog. He was every man. I mean, DDP as the character made no bones about it that, you know, he got into the business late in life and the cards were stacked against him, and, you know, he was swimming upstream and whatever other metaphor you want to come up with. That was part of who his character was. So for Page to be able to finally achieve that goal, it meant a lot to a lot of people. And I think it got Page way more over than, say, winning the belt would have gotten Scott Hall over. Scott was the embodiment of a world-class professional wrestler who absolutely did not need a belt. Not that Page did need it, but it sure helped him a lot.
SaveWithConrad.com.
My name's Daryl. Came from Massachusetts and I moved to Wisconsin. And there's a lot of people that might be asking, why go with Conrad? Why go with Supreme Lending? And let me tell you something, brother. I think about the credentials, the tag team partner that I'd be working with. First of all, we got the Podfather himself, Conrad. How can you go wrong with that? And then also go on to SaveWithEric.com, which, you know, who else could have kicked Vince's ass for 83 consecutive weeks? You can't beat that duo right there. But they did bring a secret weapon, and I didn't realize this because this was not advertised. I worked closely with Larry the Axe Thompson. And let me tell you, with all the stress with moving across the country with a large family that I have, it was reassuring to know that I had the enforcer at my back, handling questions from the other side of sellers, the other side with trying to find the right prices. He took care of all that. All I had to do was keep my eye on the prize and make it there to Wisconsin. They were absolutely fantastic. They checked in on me, especially Francis, very patient with me. I don't go through this process all the time, so I trusted the experts. I was able to call them. They called me if they had questions, and It felt like it was a personal arrangement. There was even a point in which, from the seller side, they wanted something else that wasn't part of the norm. Francis straight up told me, hey, we're loyal to you. We'll do whatever you want to do, and we'll make sure that you guys are taken care of. They came through. I made it to the dream. I'm the champion of my own destiny here. They were able to help pave the way for me and my family. I couldn't be more happy with the results. I went from having less than an acre to now 20 acres worth of land. They made that dream a reality. I'm Daryl, and I'm living in Friendship, Wisconsin, in my dream home, thanks to SaveWithConrad.com.
NMLS number 21298, Housing Linder.
SaveWithConrad.com.